To our first two guests. The first one is Mr. Justine Cleophas Pierre, and he's in Jamaica at the moment. He's an experienced workforce development and labor market consultant, a director of Dunn, Pierre, Barnett and Associates, which is one of the leading human capital development companies in the Caribbean. And he's also been a team member on many overseas missions to review, evaluate, and appraise programs aimed at promoting vocational education in countries in the Caribbean, Asia, and Africa. Mr. Pierre is also part of a research team which is presently conducting a World Bank-funded project in St. Lucia. That consultancy is to carry out a labor market need analysis survey, which is the first in the OECS. I'm sure we're going to be talking a bit about that this morning. We also do have with us, and he is right next to me here, Mr. Curlan Gilchrist, who is a consultant to the Ministry of Finance, and he's also the head of the Macroeconomic Policy Unit. Let me say good morning to both of you gentlemen. Can you hear me, Justine?
Yes, George, I can hear you.
Absolutely. Now, can you hear me, Mr. Gilchrist?
I can hear you very well, and good morning, George.
Good to have both of you gentlemen here. Justin, first of all, before we get into this discussion, let me say that you and I have been trying to get together now for several months to talk about the TVET program. I apologize that has not been happened, but we have one busy Minister of Finance down here who has been running around, and she's not been able to come in yet, but I saw her just recently, and she said to me, George, please, don't write it off. I'm coming. So we're going to get to that sooner or later. But let's start this morning by you telling me a little bit more about what you do.
Okay, George, thank you for having me on your show, and Curlan Gilchrist, thank you very much for also meeting me, speaking with me today. George, well, we are conducting a labor market needs assessment in St. Lucia, and we started on July 9th. And basically, it has, people wanted to know what is a labor market needs assessment. So, in just a summary, I just explain what the labor market needs assessment is. It's basically an assessment based on collected data and economic projection of skills areas for which will be in demand in the future. George, it is like an interplay between the execution of economic activities and the supply and utilization of skills and expertise. It's more or less, it's like a marriage between the demand and the supply of labor. It also serves as a prediction of future employment needs of a country. Now, George, it's like trying to predict what jobs will be available, let's say 3 years from now, 5, 10, or even 15 years. Okay, so it is very detailed and it is very complicated, and in most cases, labor market needs assessment must be coordinated with the Central Statistical Office, the Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Finance, and the analysis that is derived from information received from their survey would come normally through surveys. And for example, the most famous survey is what is called a job opening and labor turnaround survey. We also have what is called a labor force survey, an employment earnings surveys. And to conduct a proper labor market needs assessment, a detailed understanding of the labor market structures and functions must be done. And also it requires a lot of thorough understanding of what we call in the statistics world the key indicators of the labor market. And these indicators, there are about 40 of them that they are supplied by the International Labour Organization. So, and these labor market indicators and the related data, they're normally supplied from a mix of agencies, such like obviously the Central Statistical Office, the National Insurance Scheme, the Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Education, Culture, the National Training Agency, Chamber of Commerce, churches, the NGOs, and people from the informal or private sectors. And just to briefly explain, a few of them will be like, for example, your total population, the size of your labor force, people who are unemployed, and
speak up a little bit, Justine. Speak up.
Beg your pardon?
Speak a little louder.
Oh, sorry. So in addition to the production of these labor force data, we also as assessors need to find out additional information like the macroeconomic performance of the country, what is the situation with the industrial relations and labor and training. So it is a very, very complicated and lengthy exercise. And in case of the OECS, most countries may not have the resources to conduct a full labor market needs assessment. And in most cases, these assessments must be funded by larger international agencies. And in the case, the survey that we are conducting is sponsored by the World Bank. And it runs over 6 months. So what we will be doing in St. Lucia is to really look at every section of the economy to find out why there is a mismatch between the supply of labor and the demand of labor. So originally, we know there is a high unemployment, but we cannot scientifically predict what is the reason for the oversupply of labor.
All right, Justine, I want to talk to you a bit, in just a couple of minutes. I want to talk to you about matching jobs to employment. But first of all, I take it that you're fully aware of the unemployment situation here in Grenada.
Yes.
How do you see this labor market analysis helping us out here? And do you think that we ought to get cracking on getting one done?
Well, most definitely, George. I think that, in fact, George, that's a very good question, because all developed countries regularly carry out labor market needs assessments. In fact, most developing countries also carry out these analysis, but not as frequent. So a labor market needs assessment is necessary for Grenada because of the acute unemployment situation.
Speak up.
Yeah, sorry, because of the acute unemployment situation. However, the reason for the unemployment were never, as I said, scientifically tested. Okay, so the labor market needs assessment looks at the two sides of the equation, and it also looks at the reason for the oversupply of labor. You see, the challenge we have is that Grenada is a developing country, and 80% of all jobs in developing countries demand some type of vocational education and training. 80% of all the jobs in developing countries, such as Grenada, require vocational and technical education and training. However, George, only less than 11.5% of subjects taught in schools, in secondary schools, teach vocational education. So right away you see the disparity. I mean, no longer no wonder we have such unemployment, because there is a mismatch, right, between the subject taught in secondary school and what is demanded in the labor force. Okay.
All right. Let me try and bring Curlan in here. Curlan, you're sitting here very intently listening to what is being said. Let me hear your reaction to what you've heard so far.
Yes, I think good morning to Justine. Our GBSS guy, you know.
Oh, you're both GBSS.
Yeah.
I had a good conversation with Justine a while back.
Here, well, George.
I had a good conversation. Justine, remember we had a very good conversation a while back.
Yes.
And looking at the whole situation of the labor market in Grenada. And we do have some structural problems with the labor market situation. And I think that there is definitely a mismatch between supply and demand for labor. Now, the last time Grenada did some kind of study was way back in 1980s, early 80s, I think was in time of the revolutionary period, when an attempt was made to quantify the demand and the supply of certain occupation. And that was a useful survey. Since then, nothing has been done, and employers are just reacting. I want to say, Justine, that the perceived high unemployment rate we have in Grenada, technically, it's really artificial, and there's a lot of underemployment in that figure. And if we were to examine what are the characteristics of those who are unemployed, you may well find that it is a residual factor, residual effect of the imbalance between the supply of labor and the demand for labor. And what you find happening is that those persons who are entering the labor force not necessarily have the skills to satisfy the demands of certain employers, and that is the challenge we have. That matching it. We speak of growth. We speak of the new emerging economy. We speak of a modern economy. We speak of the transformational sectors. But as we speak of these, we have to make sure that our labor force is reoriented with the skills to take up those jobs. And unless we at the level of policy formulation and planning address those issues, we will always have a high unemployment rate. And what may happen, we are rushing towards providing jobs, but providing jobs that are very low level, that anybody can do. But the highly skilled job would always be lacking, and there will always be a demand for it, albeit, of course, the vacuum will have to be filled by imported labor. If you look at the statistics for our work permit issue, that tells a story. And we are in a hurry here. And this is an emergency situation that, as planners, we have to address as we usher into the new era of the free movement of labor. Because what will happen if we do not rebalance that equation between supply and demand for labor? We may find that with CSNE, those positions will be taken up, and our people would be left at the lower end of the labor force. But this is something that is important, and the labor market analysis must feature in the whole scheme of job creation, in the whole scheme of trying to get growth and development. We must feature the labor market analysis. If we miss an understanding of the labor market, I think we may find that we are wasting some resources, and at the end of the day, we will still struggling to get this economy on a true path of sustainable growth and development. So I just want to make these opening remarks. I suspect we will get into some technical details.
Before we get into the technical details, you mentioned here that the unemployment figures may be somewhat artificial. I want you to expand a little bit on that.
Yes, as a technician, I have argued consistently over the years that it is impossible. It is impossible to have a very high unemployment rate without the evidence of any social degradation of society and or boss and civil on. It is impossible. Grenada has a population, for argument's sake. Let's say the population is around 100,000, just for argument's sake. And our labor force right now is about 50,000. We have a working population just around 35,000. That means about 15,000 people unemployed. So what you find happening is that 35,000 persons is what is driving production in Grenada. But you depend on the entire 100,000 for spending. So you have a kind of dependency ratio, a high dependency ratio. And I'm saying, when you look at economics and if you try to balance it, those persons who we are claiming to be unemployed are actually producing something. Because you see, people's perception of unemployment is kind of relative. You may have a job that you do off and on, and still say you are unemployed. So that's why I'm saying that the rate that we calculate because of the availability of data may be overblown, and is saddled with a high level of underemployment.
Right.
You see, because theoretically, you shouldn't really have an unemployment rate of more than 10 to 12%.
All right. As a labor market consultant, Justine, having listened